I wanted to look at the AVES in a bit of detail. Just a sort of more general point, given the emphasis on ISTAR network-enabled capability in the new chapter of this defense review, do you think there was sufficient funding given to this, given the ambitions that we're developing in this area?
I think ISTAR is a classic example of incremental. I think anybody with a complex, even at the level of a single system complex command and control system, has tried to envisage a big bang project which will deliver everything you need will get it wrong, because the time it takes to develop will be such that during that period all of your assumptions would have been tested and some will have changed. So I think the key issue there was for the military to determine to get the right architectures in place, particularly relating to interoperability with key allies and interoperability between the three services. They put some really good people in place who concentrated on it quite hard, but it is a very difficult set of questions and there are quite a lot of self-appointed experts who always tell you it could have been done differently. So in the main I thought that in terms of setting out what they wanted, I thought they went about it quite well. Where I think it tests the Ministry of Defense is it is easy to get people to sign up to the importance of ISTAR until they are invited to cancel a major platform project to pay for it. So if you would ask each of the three chiefs of the General Staff what their top project was, I very much doubt they would have said ISTAR. They would have been more worried about some of the big, expensive, very capable major platform projects, because they define their service in a way. That said, Jock Stirrup is a very able guy who I know quite well, and I think and he was the DCDS equipment capability when I first took over. So we did have a bit of an overlap and I am absolutely convinced he understood the importance at the time and he was putting in place the right people and the right priorities for expenditure to deliver it.
If I am reading what you are saying correctly in terms of the lesson to be drawn from that, it is the quality of the overall defense view as against single service views when it comes to setting requirements. There are some things.
Absolutely. It creates a context in which the three services operate.
If we move on to UAVs, the MOD's Lessons for the Future paper in 2003 noted that they offered versatile capabilities as both surveillance and reconnaissance defensive platforms and demonstrated that they will play a key role in a future joint battle, and Phoenix, the only AVE deployed for the invasion of Iraq, was highlighted by commanders as a battle-winning capability. Within the overall ISTAR plan then what was the role of the AVEs?
Well, UAVs were a primary enabler for ISTAR. Intelligence, surveillance, target acquisition, reconnaissance. Because they could be fielded fairly discreetly. They were difficult to see. They can be persistent, and, of course, they help you with limitations of line of sight in mountainous terrain. It was interesting that Phoenix, which had been developed for a totally different purpose. A good example. It was originally an artillery spotting device. Outperformed against expectation, although it had major problems with reliability. You know, a lot of them got lost and fell out of the sky, but, that was known about as a limitation before the Iraq operation. Inevitably there was huge enthusiasm for more of this. Some of it gets provided by coalition partners, as you have heard. Some of it got provided by us, and Desert Hawk is a small UAV which got purchased. But the big money was riding on a project called Watchkeeper, and the difficulty with Watchkeeper was it became very political. So a Minister DP who I accompanied to a House of Commons Defence Committee hearing got himself in a position where he called an in-service date on Watchkeeper under political pressure before we had really understood what the Watchkeeper requirement was going to be, and I am afraid I just did not take ownership at that date, because we still had some really big questions to bottom out as to what the services needed Watchkeeper to deliver, and as you well understand, the UAV bit, the platform bit, is only 1/3 of the solution. There is the whole question of with which communications is this vehicle going to be able to be interoperable. Then there is the whole question of how you control it and what the ground equipment was going to be, and so until we got real clarity on those issues we weren't in a position to be able to go forward. Now I think the main gate took place in 2005, the approval. We spent about 7% of the total budget in the assessment phase. The last time I looked at an MPR. And I don't do defense these days. I do something totally different. So it was only because I was coming here I looked it up. I looked in the last published major project review. It is doing pretty well, on time and on budget. It is a complicated requirement. It is proof he can do this if he do it properly, but I was not popular with the minister, because he wanted to go for the main. You know, the in-service date he had called. There were occasions when politically the pressure was to meet the date of a main gate, which again does not make sense, because all you do is repeat the problems you have had in the past. So you have to be thick-skinned enough to stand up to that pressure politely, but in a way which informs ministers that, you know, a short-term gain here is going to lead to a lot of grief later, and the record is littered with examples of that.
What you are saying is interesting because we can see the sort of tension between doing it right and the considerable pressures from commanders that they need more. We have heard from a number of GOCs, and especially after Basra became rather difficult and they couldn't move around a lot and the limited situational awareness, that they wanted more STAR capability. How were you able to respond to that sort of pressure?
Hermes 450, which was a response to sort of filling in temporally, but even that, there were pressures. Forgive me. I can't remember whether it was done by air or done by conventional procurement, but the concern originally was that were we to go for a gap filler instantly, which was not going to be air, that in itself would delay coming into service the full STAR capability which was needed for Watchkeeper. So there were some quite hard decisions which needed to be made in London by the military customer to decide what they want to spend the money on, because they could not have both simultaneously.
Time is pressing. Perhaps just to ask if you could draw any more general lessons from this experience of the commanders frustrated by the lack of UAVs, by the lack of STAR, and the dependence upon programs that probably needed to be set in motion some time before if they were going to reach them on time, needed the sort of clarity and requirements that you,
for Watchkeeper to have delivered during a period which is relevant to Iraq, it would have to be set in motion well before the Iraq operation. And the money wasn't there to do all of these programs simultaneously. So that was one of the decisions which was taken. The compelling lesson from all of this is if you want something quickly to work, you go for something which is available apart from anything you might need to do to integrate it to work inside your own organization, because there will be some aspects of the way we operate UK military forces which will be different, say, from the Americans.